It is the last week of 2021, so you're bound to get a ton of list videos, not only from me, but from everywhere on YouTube. So I thought I'd add something new to that tradition. So today we're going to rank every single animated movie of 2021 that I saw, from the worst to the best. But before I properly get started today, I want to know your ranking of the animated movies of 2021, so go ahead and drop them down there in the comments below. Just start the conversation, because that's always the most important part. And while you're down there, don't forget to click that subscribe button, because if you like movies and TV, this is the place to be. And when you do so, you won't miss any future conversation on your favorite movies and TV. Now, obviously, I haven't seen every single animated film this year, nor will I be counting the direct-to-video animated movies like the DC movies and the Mortal Kombat film that they released this year. This will just be theatrical releases and the ones that unfortunately had to go to Netflix because of either their Netflix movies or because of the whole pandemic. Outside of that, everything counts. The list is down there. Feel free to add anything you want. Without any further ado, my friends, let's get started. The Addams Family 2 comes in last place, a film that is absolutely creatively bankrupt. It has no reason to exist outside the one obvious one, and even the director of this film constantly made fun of its storyline throughout the press junkets.
When they said Wednesday doesn't think she's an Addams, I was like, who's gonna buy that? I mean, I was just like, look at Wednesday Addams. She's obviously an Addams.
When the director of your film is making fun of your story, you know he's right. And he was right, because this film only happens because of the rating. If not for a family-oriented rating, they could easily address this film and Morticia could say that she pushed Wednesday out of her vagina, and that's the film done. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's not funny whatsoever, so it comes in as the worst film, animated film, I saw this year. America the Motion Picture comes slightly above the Addams Family 2, where in this one I at least appreciated the ideas. I just didn't really like the execution whatsoever. The ending of this film is very funny, and if they had just done that as a short film with a point to make, because the point is really made in that final scene, I would have really enjoyed this film. But they don't. They turn every single one of these characters, where again, the idea of joining these historical figures in this kind of high-octane, Expendables-like action film is a fun idea, but again, the execution is just gone to shambles, where they turn every single one of these characters into frat boys and frat bros and just go for the lowest common denominator kind of humor. And it's just very tiresome very quickly. So again, while the execution just abhorrent, just appalling, at least the ideas were fresh. At least the intention was good. The Boss Baby 2 Family Business comes up next, and right now we start getting into the watchable films in this ranking. And I'm not a big fan of the first original Boss Baby. I'm not a fan at all. But at least with its visuals and its world building, it is very creative. This one kind of does essentially the same lesson for its characters. It kind of takes away from the victory that they had in the first film. But because I don't care about that first film, it helped not hurting the film too much. Where again, it's going for kind of the same message, kind of the same lesson, but its world building and its visuals are extremely creative. I just wish that the script and the messages and the character arcs that they have in the actual story were as creative as the surface level stuff. It can be fun to look at, but that's all it is. It's a distraction. It will entertain the very young crowd, but it just is not that good as a film. 13. Sing 2 is up next, and this one just slightly edges over Boss Baby 2, another sequel, by the way. This one is at least better than the original. It's actually doing something with at least its B plotline, and this one has such powerful moments within the context of the story. I just wish the actual main plot, the main story of this, was at least better, because it feels like it's just going through the motions. It doesn't exactly do anything wrong or bad, but it also doesn't really stand out. You got some good songs, but it's also a jukebox musical. That doesn't really take a lot of creativity. It helps that it has a song by U2, and I'm a huge fan of U2, so that helps me. But it's a classic example of something that is good enough. It doesn't do anything special, but it just does stuff that is good enough. It still has all the sins and all the wrongdoings of every Illumination film, but at least it's passable. And that for Illumination is saying something. The Wish Dragon comes in at number 12, and this is one that it's tough to talk about because everything about it, nothing falls into the bad category, nothing falls into the good category. It's all in the mixed category. Why? Because it has these good lessons, it has these entertaining, funny, even to a point charming characters, but it's all stuff that is better done elsewhere and in one place specific. Because this entire film is Aladdin. It is Aladdin in the story, in the character beats, in the character types that we follow. And while again, John Cho does a great job as this dragon, and he actually has this great lesson that he has to learn throughout the film, and he actually has something to teach to someone else. While it hits those marks competently, professionally, again, a good enough, you just are constantly aware that you can see a version of this story better executed somewhere else. And I also felt the ending kind of took away from the lesson of this one character. And so again, it's one of those, it's good enough, this is fine, this is entertaining, it has its charm and some legit laughs in it, but again, it's just a lesser good version of a very familiar story that you can watch the best version of elsewhere. 11. Vivo is up next, and not the last Lin-Manuel Miranda movie that you'll see here. This is one that to me peaked at the 17-minute mark. And if you've seen the film, you know exactly what happens at the 17-minute mark. Where everything else is perfectly enjoyable, is a film that I really enjoy my experience watching it, and it's a film that I recommend, but it just didn't hit those emotions as it wanted to hit, because I just didn't relate too much to these characters. The songs themselves, as this is a musical with songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda, someone who I really adore what he does with his songs, the songs don't really stand out in this one. And I also felt at points the script was very forcible on stopping characters just to fill out that runtime. While the characters work and their interactions are nice and they have to go through these moments of self-discovery that work, the script can be very mechanical at points where it's efficient, it's functional, but it just takes away a little bit of the emotional impact of the story at points. 10. Ron's Gone Wrong breaks us into the top 10, a film that is part Big Hero 6 and Mitchell's vs. the Machines, a movie you'll see later on this list, and a little bit of Wall-E when it comes to the design of certain characters. This is, again, one of those that while it works with its character interactions and the lessons the characters have to learn and whatnot, it actually has something to say about the state of the world today and the technology we give to our kids and whatnot. Our kids, because I'm a dad. I feel like the ending completely takes away from the journey of these characters, where I enjoyed my time with them and I felt like they were learning something and this journey was important to them. And then to me, that ending completely betrays it. I'm not saying that's a fact. I'm not saying that's an objective truth. I'm saying that to me, that really left a sour taste in my mind, in my mouth. It's also an impressive feat for a first-time production company, especially one from the UK that is now joining forces with Disney. Again, this is one of those that doesn't stay with me too much because I thought everything was just fine and efficient and just slightly above average, but that ending really is the thing that brings it down. It's got some good emotions, some really fun characters, and Zach Galifianakis totally kills it. But again, if you don't land your ending, It brings you down quite a bit. Trollhunters Rise of the Titans is at number 9, and this is one I feel so conflicted about. Because I love Trollhunters, Tales of Arcadia, the show, Three Below, Wizards, this universe that Guillermo del Toro created and is now concluded in this film. I was tremendously excited for it, and I love all those shows. This is basically the end game for this grandiose saga. And I just feel like it's one of those, again, where the ending really brings it down, where we're just going back to redo things, and it doesn't really give a satisfying conclusion to anything, to any of the character journeys, to any of the character arcs. We're finally bringing all these 3 shows together at once for this big conclusion that has a good premise, has some really good action, but we also leave the character of Jim Lake out for most of the film, where he's learning all these important lessons about being a hero, but 1, it feels like he's already learned these lessons, and number 2, functionally, within the mechanics of the script, it definitely feels like he could have still been a big part, an important part of this journey, while doing something, while learning all these lessons. To just put this character that is the main protagonist that brought us into this big universe, it just felt like it cheated a little bit the story and betrayed a little bit of where the characters were going. And so this entire film is one I feel conflicted about, because I love being reunited with these characters. I love seeing them all finally together. But then we leave the best one like to the side for most of the film. And then the ending just goes back again, and it doesn't really bring a catharsis to all of it. It just tries to give another chance, and it doesn't feel wholly satisfying, sadly. The Witcher Nightmare of the Wolf comes in at number 8, and this is a really nice prequel where we go back to meet Vesemir, who is Geralt of Rivia's mentor, and we learn and see the adventure that at last brought the division between humans and Witchers. What was the thing that divided these 2 species? And we get to witness that story. We get to see how the Witchers came to the point where they're near extinction, where they cannot create any more Witchers. That as a premise, that as a core story is great. And this is a really fun adventure. Really great action, tons of fun character interactions, and lots of world building that eventually feeds into the main Netflix show starring Henry Cavill, which I also love. At the same time, this one feels like it rushes a lot of those important story beats, because this is an hour and 20-minute film, give or take. And it feels at points like it's just an overextended episode of the show, but at the same time, it's only 20 minutes overextended. It's not that much. So I feel like we could have given this film a ton more time to breathe. And I know usually animated films don't get that time to breathe. We're not going to get a Netflix direct film that is animation, or specifically anime in this case. And we're not going to give it 2 hours. But I feel like it could have helped this film a ton, because the characters are strong. The story is just going through these beats. They are effective and that lend themselves to expand on the world and the mythology of The Witcher, but we just go by them too fast, and that brings it down just a little bit. By the way, right now we're in that area. These are good movies. These are movies I recommend. So The Witcher Nightmare of the Wolf is just drawn back a little bit because of the rush of the story. But this is a good movie. If you like The Witcher, definitely check this one out. Over that, we have Pixar's Luca at number 7. And if there was a word to describe this film, it is delightful. This is absolutely delightful, where it's just a summer adventure of this young child, and it captures all of it visually in such an imaginative way, where he's trying to get this Vespa with his best friend, the one friend he's made throughout his life, and they grow so close. And then he thinks the Vespa flies, so when he dreams of riding on the Vespa with his friend, they go up to space. And when his friend says that the stars in the sky are fishes, he goes up to space and he sees the stars transform into fish. This is such a small scale but such a relatable film when it comes to capturing the magic of childhood. It's just delightful in every way. This isn't a film where the drawbacks are anything specific that the film does wrong or whatnot. It's very small scale, so it doesn't have the highest stakes. That's really the only thing that draws it back for me. It comes down to more of a preference thing, and I just prefer the stakes in other films higher on this list. Luca is just absolutely the kind of film that will absolutely warm your heart and remind you of the warmth of childhood. And in that sense, is just as magical as any of the great Pixar films. My Hero Academia World Heroes Mission sits just out of the top 5. This is an incredibly fun, action-packed time with characters that you already love if you watch the show. If you don't, this is actually the most welcoming of the 3 films to new fans, where it doesn't waste time catching you up on the events of the film. It just does a lot of great world building in itself and in its setting, and the themes that it discusses are some things that are integral to the DNA of the show, where we have this ethical dilemma between people who have quirks, people who don't have quirks, but it takes an interesting angle to it, where the villain is someone who does have a quirk and they wish they were born without it. So we have all these interesting existential dilemmas and themes going that put our heroes and our villain in direct course to crash against each other. I do wish that the middle of the film was more tension film. It can feel a bit aimless at points, but the beginning and the ending, holy shit, the ending, there are some incredible moments in this film. If you are not familiar with the show, I think this is a great way for you to see if the show will be for you and if the other films will be for you. If you're already a fan of the show, again, this is just another opportunity to spend time with these characters that you already love so much, with Deku, Bakugo, Todoroki, who all have great moments in this movie. That third act, again, My Hero Academia, in great part is about the characters, but then gives way to some incredible action sequences, and this has certainly some incredible action sequences. Again, the middle just drags a little bit, and that's why it dropped down a few spots. Disney's Encanto brings us into the top 5, and this is one that I actually just watched because it just dropped on Disney Plus on Christmas Eve, and this is a warm hug to the soul kind of film. Still one of the best quotes I've ever given to any film. This has that classic Disney magic that reminds you of watching this kind of movies growing up, and just shows that having a ton of heart goes a long way. It's got some really interesting themes, and it takes an interesting approach to it, where it gives us this entire family of eclectic and quirky characters that all have their own individual superpower. They're all basically the Avengers of their town. But then it juxtaposes the gifts and the powers of each character with family expectations, and how that plays into the themes of the film is really interesting. I also really love what it does creatively with the story, where it's all technically set in this one house, so it's a one location kind of film, but then because of all this mythology with the powers and whatnot, every time you enter a different room of one of the family members, there's an entire different area to discover, and it's all so creative. The visuals are stunning. Disney just keeps getting better movie by movie. They outdo themselves when it comes to the visuals. The characters are lovely. Mirabel and Bruno are obviously the standouts. The music by Lin-Manuel Miranda in this one totally stands out for the better. I do feel still like most of the side characters, again, apart from Bruno, are just there when they're needed, and we don't give them too much development, but you feel that warmth, familiar feeling, and the familial love between all of them, and how that then also plays into the story is just great. This is again another one where I just don't connect a lot with the big family thing, though I love to see it, though it is effective in the context of the film. It's just something that I personally do not connect with, as I'm not that close to the bigger family that I have. but this is one that just does what it does very right. Belle sits just out of the top 3, and this is one that I know it's not widely available yet everywhere, but when you get a chance to watch this one, definitely do. This one comes to us from Mamoru Hosoda, who has done some of the best animated films in the past few years, and this is one that discusses grief and how we deal with our grief very interestingly. He creates this virtual world, this social media world that people run into and hide away in. And so he uses that as a vehicle for the main character to deal with grief. And how we see this character overcome that and learn certain things through other characters, I found it very compelling and very powerful. There's one moment where it's not only emotionally powerful, narratively effective, but just visually, it's one of the best moments of the entire year in film. And it's a moment where one of the characters is singing in the virtual world. If you've seen the film, you know what I mean. It also has a B plotline where it uses the archetype of Beauty and the Beast. And that one, as much as I love the Beauty and the Beast archetype, it was functional, but it didn't hit those emotional punches as well as it should or could. I like what it's saying about grief and dealing with grief in our own way, at our own speed. And definitely that third act, that final moments of the film, those final moments get really adult and discuss some of these things in very dark ways. I appreciated that, but it can feel like a big jump in terms of the level of darkness or of the level of edge that the film is having. But this is one of those that is really, really powerful. Quick before we get into the top 3, don't forget to let me know your ranking of the animated movies you saw this year. Anything and everything, just dropping down there. And again, feel free to add or take away anything you want. You are free to add anything to your own list, or again, if you just want to add the ones I have on my list, the list is entirely in the description, so remember to check those out. So without any further ado, the top 3. Demon Slayer Mugen Train kicks us off into the top 3. This is one where I just started watching the Demon Slayer show in preparation for this film. Got to watch this in IMAX, and Ufotable is my favorite anime studio, and they did not disappoint. This animation is mesmerizing, the music is sensational, and we get straight into it from where we left off in the show, and then by the end we kick off into season 2. Not many anime films do that. Nowadays every story is kind of separate, and that takes just a little bit away from me. That's why the My Hero Academia film, as much as I love My Hero Academia more than Demon Slayer, that film had to sit just a few spots behind it. It's just a great, fun, action-packed film. That entire third act, the fight between Rengoku, who is my favorite character, and if you've seen the film, you're probably feeling sorry for me. Rengoku versus Akaza is a sensational fight. One of the best action sequences, animated or not, of this entire year. We get a ton of character moments and character development for our main trio with Tanjiro, Zeniko, and Inosuke. It's just a ton of fun with a typical sense of humor of this show. Just structurally, it can feel like it's a bunch of episodes collaged together, especially when you get into that third act. As much as I love it, it definitely feels like it doesn't properly belong in this one movie. It feels like an extra thing, and it's an extra awesome thing. It's like sprinkles on an ice cream. I'm just not a fan of sprinkles that much. I would definitely choose any other topping over sprinkles. That's just it. Sprinkles are fine, just not the thing I would go for. So in the context of this film, without the food analogies, this is one where it works so well. And then there's just a disconnect between when the train crashes and then we have that fight, which that fight in itself is fucking amazing. But that's why it only sits at number 3. Raya and the Last Dragon comes in at number 2, and this is the kind of Disney movie I missed, where you get this incredibly imaginative world that you want to find out more about at every step, and the film takes you into all these interesting locations to meet these interesting eclectic characters that represent how the story of the film is actually affecting the entire world. And so we get to feel that grief and that loss through this epic journey that can feel a little bit like Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I do not mean that in any insulting way at all. That is a pro for this film. The film also takes an interesting and mature approach at the lessons that the characters are learning, where the only way to coexist is through compromise and, well, coexistence and respect between all the people. The action sequences are fantastic, where you actually had people doing the motion capture for the action sequences, and it actually doesn't come down to a big fight and whatnot. It comes down to understanding and talking to one another and seeing the other person's point of view. This is one that just filled most of the boxes for me. To me, the only thing that draws it back is a little bit of the humor felt forced or even unfunny. That's really it. This is the type of Disney film that I love and that I miss, where it's this big epic, but then has that Disney magic and that familiar feeling that welcomes you into a Disney film. But The Mitchells vs. the Machines is the #1 animated film of 2021 for me. Talk about imaginative, creative, and emotional. This is one that I was so afraid of going in, where you have this family story with a dad and a daughter. They're not seeing eye to eye. They want completely different things, and the dad wants her to be kept around and she wants to go away because she doesn't like the pressure of her family. And then for some reason you have this whole other plot line of machines and the apocalypse taking over the world. And looking at the trailers, I just didn't know how these two connected. And lo and behold, they connected beautifully, to the point where the original title of the film was going to be Connect. This is a film that I just entirely saw myself in this character and the journey she has to go through. And the film does such a great job at not only showing you her side and then showing you the dad's side. Puts you on both their sides, you understand both their sides, and then the whole machine thing just gives way for some hilarity and for some incredible misadventures that little by little bring this family together to the point where they wouldn't have survived this without one another. That moose and what it represents is one of the most emotional things, one of the most emotional MacGuffins in film ever. Not just this year. The characters are likable and hilarious and emotive. The machine side of where they want to belong to this family as they lose kind of the chip in their brain is just so sweet. Visually, it's one of the most interesting and unique films you will ever see. The way they use the animation and the way they use the hard lines around the characters, where it feels like these are only first drafts of the looks, but it works so well and it stands out so much from everything else. This is one that just fills out every single box when it comes to the narrative, to the emotion. It just captures it all beautifully, and everything it set out to accomplish, it accomplished it in spades. And so that is for sure my #1. And so that is my ranking of 2021 animated films. Don't forget to let me know your ranking in the comments below, your thoughts on my ranking, anything and everything down there. Just start the conversation, because it's always the most important part. And if you enjoyed what you saw here, make sure you click that subscribe button so you do not miss any future conversation on your favorite movies and TV. Thank you so much for watching. You are the best. Remember that we'll have more lists throughout this week. We'll have 2021 comic book movies ranked. We'll have top 10 best movies, top 10 worst movies. We'll have a review for the Book of Boba Fett, and of course the most anticipated movies of 2022. I hope to see you in those and any other video. And so until then, love each other and love the movies.